Hey, I'm Matt Manny. Thanks so much for joining me for today's devotional thought. Today we're talking about being yoked with Jesus, or yoked Jesus, as it talks about in the devotional. The word yoke is a slang word for sometimes what we would think would be like the yoke of an egg or the yoke of an oxen, but when we talk about yoked in slang, it's that idea of somebody who's strong and muscular, who lifts weight and hangs out at the gym, where you're lifting hundreds of pounds and you grunt and it's very masculine. But we're talking about yoked in Jesus' day was a whole different concept. To be yoked in Jesus' day, there's two thoughts really. There's an agricultural, literal thought, and that was when a farmer was going to go out and plow his fields, he would take a piece of wood that would stretch over the top of the shoulders of a pair of oxen. And so instead of just one oxen pulling the weight and pulling the load, you would have two that would pull together. It was a second thought was this when it came to religious teaching. Religious rabbis who traveled the countryside kind of doing like TED Talks or special speaking engagements like what we would have today. They would have a certain teaching specialty. They would have an expertise, if you will. Some were experts in Old Testament law. Others were experts in certain aspects of the law. And so each different rabbi, depending on what expertise you wanted to find, you would follow a different rabbi. And they would have their classic line of teaching and thinking, skill set, and school of training. But for Jesus, when Jesus comes along in Matthew chapter 11, he says this, that are you tired, are you burned out on religion? He says, take my yoke upon you, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. That is, my teaching is easy. Well, what was Jesus' yoke? He said it all comes down to two thoughts, love God and love people. One of the best ways we can love God is by loving people. And one of the greatest ways that we have the endurance and the patience and the capacity to love people is only when the love of God flows in and through us. There were Belgian draft horses that were at a competition one time, and they were the strongest horses in the world. And these horses alone can pull up to 8,000 pounds by themselves. But when they're yoked up, when they're pulling a sled together in this competition, we would think that they could pull up to twice as much if you had two horses hitched together. But amazingly enough, they could haul not just, instead of 8,000 pounds apiece, they could haul 24,000, three times as much, 24,000 pounds. It doesn't stop there though. If the horses are trained from a young age to work together and think as one unit, as one machine, they can pull a staggering amount. As much as 30 to 32,000 pounds. The horses can pull 4 times as much when they are yoked together. Jesus says, watch me, walk with me, and learn from me. We can find life, the tension and stress we face can diminish when we are walking with Jesus according to His ways. How do we do that? Love God and love people. How do you navigate through a storm? Well, we consider claiming the promise that Jesus bears our burdens with us. And when we're so tired and struggling, not knowing what to do, we start with love God and then love people the best that we can with God's grace and Jesus' help in our lives. Today's devotional thought is taken from Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 through 30. Thanks so much for joining me.